welcome to HR in the Fast Lane. I'm Nicole Martin, and today we're covering a topic that's one of those things that you may be thinking about, reading about, and seeing in papers and online, and that's data breaches. Have you thought about that lately? In HR, it's one of those areas where those of us who've been in the field, you have a dotted line sometimes to technology, security, safety, and policy formation. And so that's why I've invited our guest today, Mr. Michael Bruck. Michael, welcome.
Hello. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. I appreciate you coming to HR in the Fast Lane.
Definitely my pleasure. Looking forward to it.
Well, we're going to have fun today talking about this. So Michael is the president and chief technology officer for BAI Security. This is a company that actually specializes in risk assessments and breach assessments and IT auditing, and the list goes on essentially, but they have become the trusted partner for security for thousands of organizations across the US. And I really truly believe that this is a topic that's so real and relevant right now, especially for those of us that are not only working to create policy formation around it, but training.
Right.
So first, help us understand a little bit about why this is common right now. Why is this hacking into organizations even, right?
Certainly, yeah. Actually, hacking has been around for a very long time. I'm sure everyone's heard about that in the news. But
unfortunately,
realistically now, it's really become more monetized than it's been in the past. Okay. A lot of times in the past, it was college kids, in their dorm rooms trying to have a little fun and make their name known. These days, really much more organized crime and other groups that are really trying to profit from this. So you see everything from collecting credit cards and social security numbers for identity fraud to more interesting things now, more recently, in terms of collecting intellectual property, client lists, and internal information about businesses. And now all that information is being published and sold.
Wow. And that's something that I think I never even knew about prior to speaking with you, this concept of the dark web.
Right. Dark web is essentially another layer of the internet that goes much below the radar in terms of law enforcement. So they routinely exchange or resell illegal things. Anything from guns and drug paraphernalia to data, such as credit cards, client lists, as I already mentioned, social security numbers and identity fraud data, all in the opportunity to collect money from that, obviously. So there's literally like an Amazon-like store that you can go in, pick what you want, pay your price, and buy your credit card numbers or social security numbers or client lists and everything. So
it's absolutely terrifying when you think about it.
Yeah, a lot of organizations don't realize, or people in general don't realize that exists. And of course, they hear the big news about credit card data being stolen from a big breach, like a Target breach or something else. But they don't really realize even smaller organizations are really affected by this. Because when we go out on the dark web and we look to see what's out there, as part of our business practice, we see all kinds of intellectual property, client lists, things that are really important to organizations that go anywhere from the small to medium, let alone the larger organizations that have so much of that data.
Well, and you think of technology, because all of us have heard about, the different malware, the different technology that we're using. It's kind of commonplace. Mm-hmm. And you'd think, why is it so common that companies, or criminals, I should say, are targeting the companies and getting past that? And why aren't organizations really that successful in preventing it from happening?
Yeah, there's actually been a really big transition in terms of how hackers go after that data. Okay. Traditionally in the past, they've tried to circumvent firewalls and, in other words, coming in through the internet into the internal parts of the organization, the internal network, and get data. But that's really been shored up over the years with more use of technology. So now what they're doing is they're circumventing all of that perimeter-based protection to now going directly after end users. So you see all these things about emails of phishing, trying to buy this or that. That's very common from an advertising and trying to sell things to people perspective. But the hackers are now using that to get viruses or malware into the organization through the end user. So the end user will open up an attachment in their email, or they'll simply go to a malicious website and that will infect their local computer. So they're circumventing all the security controls and going right to the end user, which really today is one of the biggest weak points in an organization's security posture.
Well, and when you think about that, the impact is significant, because usually when it comes to data breach from a perspective of a business, they're not only worried about having to disclose the data breach to people that work for them, but obviously to their customers or the open market. And now that's regulated, right? They have to actually disclose this to the media, even if this occurs. So you're seeing impacts. I'm wondering, can you give us an example of maybe not identifying an organization, but a way that this has been used against an organization?
Certainly, yeah. There's numerous ways that that's actually happening. Organizations now, like I said, are being attacked by this virus or ransomware software where the end user will load an attachment in email or, again, go to this malicious website and get the software unintentionally.
Okay.
That software will infect their computer, and like in the case of ransomware, now it will infect all of the pertinent files on that end user's computer or what they have access to in the company and encrypt them so that no one in the company can actually open and look at those files anymore. And then they'll be conveniently given an option to pay a ransom to get that data back.
Oh my goodness.
And unfortunately, a lot of organizations put in that position don't have proper backup systems in place to recover the data on their own, or at least not in an expeditious way, so they pay the ransom. So in recent time, 6 months, 12 months, a couple years, that has really escalated significantly because people are paying the ransoms to get their data back.
Easy money, I suppose, right?
Absolutely.
That's
right.
absolutely horrifying when you think about it. You mentioned that it has a lot to do with the end user. And so if we're in organizations and we're responsible for training end users, taking training, a different angle, a cultural perspective on this from my view would be that often security and technology comes down to the end user in the organization being the employee as a rule or a policy or don't do this. And I think this is a wonderful opportunity with such a fascinating topic to empower potentially the end user being the employee and help them become more aware. And this is something that you do.
Absolutely. As one of our core services, we're actually paid by organizations to attempt to breach them just as a hacker would. And so it gives us an idea to think like a hacker, do what they would. So we research what actual kind of breach activity happens and figure out how it happens so we can mimic that in our testing processes. Okay. And one of the things that comes from this is a really accurate identification of what are the weakest points in an organization. That's why they're hiring us, essentially, is to tell them what those weak points are.
It's proactive.
It's consistently coming back to end users being the weak link.
Okay.
And in the past, like you suggested, end users are typically just told, do this, specifically don't do this. But really, there's an opportunity for HR professionals to get engaged, to really empower these users to be protectors of the organization and specifically the organization's data. Obviously, HR, very, very keenly tied to training for the end users. An up-and-coming, and really what should be a very up-and-coming area is security awareness training. Yeah. It's basically making the end users more aware of things not to do. Not necessarily tell them don't do this or what have you, but look for signs within these emails that are coming in with the malicious attachments or signs on a website that something might be fishy so that you're reducing the risk of them opening one of these viruses and infecting their systems and infecting the company. Yeah,
and it makes perfect sense because businesses arm or employ tools and provide a number of different things to their end users being the employee, be it a phone, a tablet, a computer, right? And there's no sense in which we don't provide that end user training. It makes good sense, especially if you're investing that kind of money into all the resources that the talent has, but then they go free with it essentially and potentially put the company at risk unbeknownst to them.
Right. I think that training on this particular area is something somewhat new. Yeah. This area where we talk about hackers attacking the employees directly is somewhat new in terms of the general landscape of hacking. And so I don't think that all organizations have really caught up to that just yet. So I think one of the important things that we're discussing here today is really the key importance of HR to take an active role in identifying security awareness training programs that are effective and making sure that they're rolled out to all the employees in the organization. And that's a continuing process.
Because it's changing.
Absolutely.
It's not something like you're one and done. I'm guessing that hacking, like you say, changes. The symptoms and signs change.
Absolutely.
Evolves.
If you want to be really effective in training, you need to be able to continue to evolve that training so it mimics real world threats that are happening.
How often do you think that would take place?
On a very bare minimum, I would say annually.
Annually?
Quite honestly, when we go in and do our risk assessments in organizations, those that do it annually certainly fare much better than those that don't. But then organizations that have it semi-annually are a little better. Okay. Organizations that at least do formal training semi-annually and then do some other small ad hoc trainings, maybe even quarterly, or at least publications and posters and things like that, they're the most effective at reducing their own risks.
I think we should end with a story because, to work for you would be absolutely fascinating. And I can imagine that the talent that you attract are inquisitive, intriguing minds that have good wits about them, right?
Absolutely.
And could think like a criminal, but definitely are the good people of the world fighting against this.
Absolutely, right.
So an example maybe about an organization you've walked into in terms of a proactive breach audit, let's say. Right. Give us a fun example of what that's like. Sure. What are you looking at?
Yeah, in fact, we were just working on one this week. We just concluded it yesterday. particular bank on the West Coast hired us to do what we call a breach risk assessment. We were given the option to try to attack them from the internet, as would typically. We attacked them from an email perspective, sending in these phishing emails with attachments that had our own malware on it, as well as phone calls and actually calling them directly and saying that we're working with IT, we're trying to fix a problem, can you go to this website and download some software to help us do some maintenance on your PC. All those are different, what we call attack vectors, which our auditors are essentially trying to encourage the employee to do something that they really shouldn't. And this is where the security awareness training would help them identify what we're doing as something that's odd or malicious in nature.
Wow.
But in every one of those cases that we were able to do the email and the phone, we were successful in getting end users to go along with the ruse and download the software, and we got our software installed on the computer, and we had full access to their systems. So
my goodness.
Obviously there's always ways to continue to improve, and 90+% of the time we're actually able to get into organizations through that method.
Wow.
So it's really key that HR professionals get engaged with this security awareness training and definitely try to reduce the risks of the organization through that.
Absolutely. It's a whole new world.
Absolutely.
I mean, honestly, if you think about it. Well, I hope that all of you really got something out of today's topic. I believe that I learned something when I first met Michael, and I encourage all of you to take a kind of proactive stance on this. Obviously, when we have to look at the things that we're putting in place, we want to find out about these opportunities for risk proactively versus reactively. And so I would encourage you to check out BAI Security. Where can they find you, Michael?
We're all over the web, but of course, www.baisecurity.net was our basic website. We're also on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn, we have a blog as well, but you can get to all that through our main website.
Absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much, Michael, for your time today. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.